And you know that Baba gives a lot of these inexplicable expressions that are very persistent. And when you have a saying that's persistent, because of the fact that it's persistent, it indicates that it's true. So I have a few of these. So there's an expression: if you take all the ocean and turn it into ink, and you take all the land and turn it into paper, if you take all the trees and turn them into pens, and you take the intellect of Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, still you would not be able to write all the knowledge. That is to say, it is vast. And when we are telling the knowledge to people, like the introduction course or something, is not vast at all. It's just very simple. And in fact, it is highly simplified as a way of a starting point. But the starting point is just the starting point. It's not the whole thing. And so these expressions are there to get it into our thick skulls that just by having exposure to the knowledge does not mean by any means that you grasp the knowledge. You just knocked on the door, you didn't even open it yet. So that's what that means. So we have to deal with that. And what gets in the way is our assumption that by knowing a little bit, we know everything. And that is a delusion. Okay, next one. So, comparatively speaking, only a very few BKs know the knowledge at depth. It takes much time and experience. So in India, it says, there is a saying, which I haven't written up here, but there is a saying, that you can't really consider a person to be a yogi until they've been practicing for 50 years regularly and conscientiously. So that's how much time it takes to get it. And experience means you have to go through many, many things before it really sinks in what this is. So because of this, there is a caveat. Caveat is a Latin word meaning be careful. And so this is another of these expressions. There was a rat who found a little piece of turmeric and he thought he was a grocer. So it's like you get exposure to the knowledge a little bit and you think you have the whole thing, but you don't. Here's another one. Do not be a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat which is not there. And this refers to a lot of the details of knowledge, and most people get caught up in the question of the drama. So in this and the next EGY, I want to really take up the drama because so many people are finding that the scientific discoveries that are being made and have been made for a long time go totally against the assumption that the drama is the material world. And in the Murli today, Baba made it very clear that if you think like that, you haven't understood. In which case, you're a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat, which is not there. So the black cat is the assumption that the drama is in the material world. And he says, no, that's not where it is. And in the Murli today, there was an interesting little key. And you remember Baba talked about a key. And it's a combination lock. And the combination is 000. So we'll go into that a little bit later, what that is. So then the next one Baba has said that this is Sahaj Raj Yoga. So the word Sahaj is almost universally translated by BKs to mean easy. However, there is nothing easy about Raj Yoga. It is simple, but not easy. So there's a big difference between the meaning of the word simple and the meaning of the word easy. So sometimes people don't know that difference. So Raj Yoga requires mehnat. So mehnat is the Hindi word for effort. And so mehnat means, effort means high-level personal discipline of the intellect and mind, and then lifestyle also. So this is not the same as Purusharat. So the word Purusharat is almost universally translated by BKs as effort. However, Purusharat has nothing to do with mehnat. So Purusharat, if you break down the word Purush and Arat, so Purush means the being, and Arat means for the purpose. So anything you do for the purpose of your being, that's called Purusharat, which is not exactly effort, but it's more like intention. And it is an intention based on enlightened self-interest. So you have to take a look at the meaning of enlightened self-interest. A lot of people think about the word selfishness, that if you do something for yourself, it's selfish. No. If you do something for yourself, you're a soul, that's Purusharat. And you do something for yourself because it's your responsibility to do things for yourself. Nobody else is going to do things for you. You have to look after yourself. This is called adulthood. Now, selfish is when you do something for yourself at the cost of someone else. That means you are exploiting. And so the greatest punishment that is mentioned in the Murlis, which is called Arorav Narak, which is sometimes translated as the extreme depths of hell, but it's not that. That's a very general word. Arorav Narak is a very specific type of punishment. And the descriptions of hell in the Murli are taken from the scripture called the Garud Puran, and which is almost identical with Dante's Inferno. And so some of you are familiar with the literature of Dante, the Paradiso, the Inferno, and the Purgatorio. In between, you have the Purgatorio, Purgatory. So in the Inferno is the details of the punishment for what different people did. So exploitation is considered really bad in Indian scriptures, and the punishment for that is something like being held upside down with your head above a fire or something like this. I can't remember exactly, but it is there, and I looked at it a long time ago. So you need to be careful about exploitation, because people don't think about that very much, but it is something that quite a few people do. Okay, let's go further. So a more applicable and relevant interpretation of the word Sahaj would be in the context of people and innate. So when Baba talks about this as Sahaj Raj Yoga, it's most often in a direct comparison with the practices of the sannyasis. Sometimes he calls this Pravruti Marg and that Nirvruti Marg. And so Nirvruti Marg means the path of isolation. That's usually translated as the path of isolation. And isolation doesn't actually mean isolation. It just means that these are groups of sannyasis who are not married and they don't have children, but they are gathered together. And so it's not totally isolated. There are some who are isolated, but many are not. As soon as you get an ashram, then you have people in it. And then the word sahaj also means innate. And innate means it is natural for you, when you're in your consciousness of who you are, to be a Raj Yogi, because it's logical, consistent, and coherent with your identity. So once you begin to use these two dictionary definitions, depending on the context, you do begin to make serious progress. And so what you can see from this, and which you can see also when you understand the knowledge of the drama the way Baba intends you to, which is very different from the way it is presented, then you can start to really make serious progress, because there you are on a different level altogether. So that's very interesting. Yes. Excuse me. So in the Sakhar Murlis, comparisons are made between Vedantic Hinduism and the path of bhakti. So Vedantic Hinduism is not bhakti, and bhakti is not Vedantic Hinduism, but they coexist. And the way the gurus present Hinduism is that Vedantic Hinduism and the path of bhakti is one and the same thing, but actually they're not. So they do coexist, but they're actually mutually exclusive. So Vedantic Hinduism is this philosophy of omnipresence of God, and they talk about Brahman referring to the very subtle energy of matter, which they think is everything. But for any religion to get accepted by the people, the religious authorities must incorporate the people's existing adherence to their mythology, legends, incomprehensible beliefs, and folklores into the theologies that the religious authorities wish to promote. Otherwise, they'll never get accepted. So this is why they mixed it up. And this is what you get. And because the people are basically oriented towards blind faith, it means it's very easy for the gurus to mix up two things that are completely mutually incompatible and get them to go along with it. And this applies in many areas. For example, in terms of the political and civil service structure, the legal structure, what you have in India is a combination of what's in the Constitution, which is based on the American and French constitutions, which is all basically on the idea of democracy. And so the country is called a secular democracy. But the prevailing social attitudes are feudal. And so the feudal system and the democratic system are completely mutually exclusive, but they coexist. And when you want to export that combination into another culture, like we say Western culture, for example, it absolutely cannot go, because the people are not disposed to accepting two mutually exclusive legal systems. But because in the Hindu world, the legal system and the religious system and the government system and the family system is all one thing, they can easily get the people to accept all these mutually incompatible things. And this is also a prelude to us talking about Dharma, which we will get to shortly. So this case of combining your theology with the existing mythology and folklore is the case for all man-made religions. So in this context, Baba clarifies that Hinduism or Hindu Dharma is not a religion. And so he calls it the Adi Sanatan Devi Devta Dharma. And so this refers to the civilization in the Golden and Silver Ages. And there is no religious activity and no concept of religion at that time. So the word Dharma refers to how people are, how their consciousness is, their life and their culture. Then, at the time of the Copper Age, which is also known as the Bronze Age, the remnants of the ways of life of the Golden and Silver Ages, combined with the awakened memories of what had happened in the previous confluence of the Iron and Golden Ages, formed the background of myths, legends, beliefs, practices, superstitions, etc., upon which all the great religions of the world were overlaid. So this is just the way it is, but nobody talks about it because they don't know where these myths and legends came from. But then Baba makes it very clear where they came from and why they came up. So during the current period of time, he keeps telling us that there's about to be extinction of the human race, except for a few survivors, through nuclear war and natural calamities and civil war. And we can see all this beginning to happen. And I was talking last night to some young people, and they were telling me that, look, our generation does not believe that we will live for more than 15 years because of the situation of climate change. And we are, the human race is about to end the world and we have 15 more years to go. And they base it just on how they feel and how they interpret what they come to know about in the area of politics and climate change. So they are in a mentality which says there is no such thing as the future. That's very heavy. And in my generation, and I don't know how many of you are of what age, but these are the young people, and they are feeling very strongly this feeling that we have a very short period of time for the rest of our life, and they put it at 15 years. So let's see what happens with that. Okay. Now, Vedic India arose in the 5th century of the current era through Adi Shankaracharya, and he and his gathering over a certain amount of time rewrote all the Indian scriptures and introduced the Vedas, the Manusmriti, the Sanskrit language, and the concept of the omnipresence of God and related philosophies. And that means that their description of the philosophy of karma is very different from Baba's description. So we have to see that comparison. Now, the pre-Vedic ideas remained in the folklore, the mythology, and different stories handed from grandparents to grandchildren, and that were sustained by the pre-Vedic traditional healers and mystics. So this is all happening in the Iron Age, this overlaid situation of the Vedic India, the Vedas, and all of these scriptures, which are the ones that Baba is targeting. And then there is the pre-Vedic beliefs and traditions. And Baba actually gives importance to them because they contain elements of what he calls truth, which are strong enough to take down or deconstruct the concepts of Vedanta. And this is what Baba is doing, but nobody talks about it because it is taboo. The next one. So Baba speaks of Gyan as Avinashi Gyan. Avinashi means indestructible. So this knowledge or traces of it cannot be destroyed. So although the Bhagavad Gita was completely rewritten by Shankaracharya and his followers, some of the original concepts persisted. And so in the Sakar Murlis, Baba picks up the surviving elements of truth wherever they occur, and he uses them to enable people to grasp the complete knowledge which he discusses in the Sakar Murlis. Now the Avyakt Murlis don't do this. And the Sakar Murlis are spoken by the ocean, you heard about that yesterday, and the Avyakt Murlis are the voice of the great river, the Brahmaputra, which emerged from and flows into the ocean. So we talked about that yesterday. Yes. Now, probably the most often quoted verse from the Bhagavad Gita is this famous one, Yada yada hi dharmasya kalani bhavati bharata abhyutaman adharmasya tadamanam shri jamyaham. So that's Sanskrit, which school children learn in school how to pronounce, but it's often used. And the meaning is that I come when there is the extreme of adharma, and I manifest myself and destroy adharma. I establish true dharma. So this phrase gets translated in many ways according to the understanding and background of the interpreter. So usually they use the word religion for dharma, and then for adharma they say irreligiousness and unrighteousness. And this is why there is so much focus on you're not allowed to be angry, you're not allowed to be lustful, you're not allowed to be greedy. All of these 5 vices are things that you're not allowed to do because that is called irreligion and unrighteousness. Actually, it isn't, but what happens is that the religious mentality of Hinduism, when it is mixed with Gyan, that mentality stays, and so you get a lot of this forceful descriptions of how you're not allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do that and you're a sinful soul and all of this stuff. So this is where you get Jnana and Bhakti getting mixed up together, and this is completely understandable because people really do believe that if you're going to do a spiritual practice, then it involves penalties and punishment and all this stuff. And so you get a lot of that. But actually, if you want to operate in the level that we're talking about here, then you need to think about these things in a very different way, which is what we're looking at here. Okay. Now, generally, people interpret dharma as religion and adharma as irreligion and unrighteousness, but there are other ways to interpret it. In fact, the word dharma means what it is, as opposed to adharma, which means what it is not. So it's nothing to do with unrighteousness or irreligiousness. So in this sense, dharma would refer to spirituality and adharma would refer to materialism, where dharma means you are a soul and adharma means you are a body. So which is it? Now, this particular applies to sense perception and by extension to attraction and repulsion. So all these things about the five vices is all about attraction and repulsion. So if you're attracted, that's called desire. And if you're repelled, that's called, violence, because you will try to destroy what repels you. And so this then is that the religion has promoted desire and violence among the people, contrary to what it planned on doing, but that was the result of interpreting dharma and adharma to mean religion and irreligion and unrighteousness. So now we have to look at it as either you're going to look at things from a spiritual angle or from a material angle. And this is a very, very big key point, which is causing lots of issues among the Brahmin world because of not having clarity about the location of the drama. Where is the drama? So we will look at that because that is a big thing. Okay. So, Swadharma cannot be translated as the religion of the self. There is no such concept. Swadharma means yourself is a soul. And Paradharma means what it is not. That means the soul is not a material body. You are not an object, but a being. So you have to think about that. You are not an object, and all the things that surround you, which are objects, are known to you through your sense perception. And you know they exist because of your sense perception, not because of any other reason. And this is a big, important point. Science claims that there's no difference between whether something exists by itself or whether it exists because you see it. It says there's no difference. And I mentioned this to a friend of mine who is a scientist. I gave an example which philosophers use in philosophy classes in university. They ask you to consider this question. If a tree falls down in the jungle and nobody sees it, did it really happen? And so this is a philosophical question. And as long as a person is looking at it from a scientific angle, they will say that if the tree fell down in the in the jungle, whether somebody saw it or not doesn't make any difference. But what Baba is saying is actually it does, because there's no way you would know about it unless you observed it. And then it comes into the historical record. So the historical record is what you saw or felt or heard or experienced. If you didn't experience it, it didn't exist. And if something is deleted from the historical record, people believe that by doing that you can claim with full justification that it never happened because it wasn't recorded so in the historical record. And this is how wars are reported. And what happens in war is when things get too bad, the journalists are killed or kept out so that nobody knows, which means you can claim that nothing happened. But from Baba's point of view, that doesn't fly. If something happened and someone experienced it, did it, or saw it, then it's there. And if something happened which no one experienced or saw or had anything to do with, then it doesn't have any meaning in the human experience, you see. So this is a philosophical matter, and this is also something that is very important in terms of how we understand what Baba's talking about when he uses the word drama, because the location of the drama is very important. Where is the drama? Okay, let's go further. So the 5 vices. So greed, anger, lust, attachment, ego. So these are in fact emotional reactions to sense perceptions of attraction or repulsion. The soul reacts emotionally to sense perceptions when it is weak. There is spiritual depletion, and the emotional reactions carry the mind away like a boat in a storm. This is from the 2nd chapter of the Gita, this expression about when the Gita is talking about the 5 vices, it says these are experiences, which I will call emotions, that carry the mind away like a boat in a storm. So your actions are based on your emotions, and your emotions are stronger than your conscience, and therefore you do not act according to who you are, but you act according to the impact of sense perception. And this is why sense perception is called deceptive. Now in the Murli translation you hear it as deceitful, which is completely different from deceptive, so you need to correct that. Deceitful is a person who has the intention to deceive, and deceptive is something that deceives with or without an intention. So there's a big difference. So in the Murli, this is called storms of Maya. Now, it is inaccurate to use the pronoun she for Maya. There's no personification of Maya. There's no lady going around deceiving people. This is what people believe. Maya is a woman. No, it's an idea, and it means something which is not there. So you can't have a pronoun, especially not a female. It has to be called it. Now, while Ravan is a personification of the force of negativity, there is an actual persona of Ravan. He's got a wife, and he's got a kingdom, and he's got all sorts of characteristics that are included in any representation of Ravan, but there's nothing like that for Maya. So Maya is not a personification, it's just a word that means something which is not there, which you take something to be real, which is actually nothing more than a sense perception, but you are deluded into thinking it is real, and so you react accordingly. I think one of the reasons they say Maya is female is because of this attraction and repulsion. So the sannyasis were trying to do akarma, which means no karma. And then their description of karma is marriage and family and business. And so they thought that the existence of a female body causes them to be attracted, which causes them to do negative karma, which causes them to be in karmic bondage. And so the problem is the females. Get rid of all the females, and then we'll get rid of all the negativity in the world. But this is the foundation of the patriarchal system, which is the foundation of the man-made religions, which is the cause of human suffering in many ways because of how they describe things. And so Shiv Baba comes along and says, all these religions are actually misrepresenting everything, and they are adharma. And so he comes along and sets things right, and that's called the destruction of adharma, or the destruction of something which is false, and its replacement by something which is true, much to the consternation of humanity, which objects strongly. There you are. That's why all this is taboo. Yes. So now the Sakar Murlis make reference to this quite frequently. So the first point is, what are you? Of course, in the BK pictures it says, who are you? But actually, I should say, what are you? So what are you? Are you a physical object, a male or female body? Or are you a spiritual being, a genderless, colorless, spiritual, non-material being of light? Which is it? Now the second point is, what is God? And the third point is, what is happening? So what is happening has to do with this word drama. So we're getting closer to where is the drama and what is the drama. Now the Bhagavad Gita begins with the words Shri Bhagwan Uvach, meaning the most pure God is speaking. So of course, if everything is God, there cannot be God speaking to himself, because that doesn't make sense. And he wouldn't. You already know. So right there at the beginning of the Gita, the way the Gita has been written is self-contradiction all the way through. But because it contains quite a bit that is accurate, it persists. And so Baba is deconstructing all the parts that are falsifications, as he puts it, and enabling you to actually know what the Gita is, what the Gita says, and that what he says is actually the original knowledge of the Gita. Yes. So descriptions of God are found in any and all scriptures except the Dhammat. So the Dhammat is the Buddhist scripture where there is no belief in God. The Buddha had responded to somebody who asked him about God. He said, I haven't thought about God, so I can't say anything. And then that was interpreted to mean that there isn't anything like God. Actually, it doesn't mean that, but it has become the tenet of Buddhism as a result of the interpretations of the religious authorities. So in all the scriptures, the descriptions of God are many and vast and full of contradictions. So if something's full of contradictions, then it's not logical, which means it can be deconstructed by somebody who thinks clearly. And Shiv Baba, as far as I can tell, is the clearest of all thinkers. So this also implies that the intellects of people are unable to sustain logical, coherent thought about matters that are beyond sense perception. So that's the way it is. Yes. Sheep Baba is called the giver of the third eye of knowledge, and that can also be called Shrimat. So again, we're looking at the actual description of the Gita. So the scripture, the Gita, is called Shiromani, which means the most valuable. And it is called Shrimat or Shrimad with a D, Bhagavad Gita. So Mat, as I told you a few times, means concept. So Shrimad Bhagavad Gita means God is speaking to you about yourself, about himself, in the context of feuding humanity on the brink of the last world war. And it is a civil war, and it is the inner war, the struggle for meaning, and the search for intangible truth. So now I think that this is probably a good place for us to stop. Let me just see. What we'll just do is the Gita is really a war between humanity and God. And ultimately, the man concedes defeat. And defeat means capitulating to the greater understanding of God. And that takes the form of destruction of false ego or ego death. So again, I'm bringing in this concept of drama. People believe, pretty much all the BKs believe that the drama is what you experience in the outside world, all the events and things that are happening. They say that is the drama, and it's something which is outside of your body. And what Baba says is the drama is a dot. The Murli today, he talked about the fact that he'd given you 3 keys, and it's a combination lock, and the combination numbers are 000. So 10 is the soul, another 0 is the God, and the third 0 is the drama, which means that all 3 are non-material. But BKs have not understood that the drama is non-material, and it is located in your soul, not in the external world. So that means we have to really do a whole big thing about the drama, which is, I think, why we're going to do another one next Sunday. Hopefully it's convenient for everyone. So the defeat takes the form of this destruction of false ego or ego death. So the ego is when you are thinking that you know something to be true, which is not true, and you base your sense of self on this idea of what is true. And ego death is when you realize that all these things that you are perceiving through your sense perceptions are, in a very important sense, not real. And it's interesting that in Hinduism, they say the world is like a dream. And people think, oh, that's a very fanciful idea. But actually, it's very close to what he's saying, that the drama is inside your consciousness, and where you perceive it is inside your mind, and it seems to be outside of you, but your reactions to it are not the same as what's going on outside of you. How you take it, what you do with it, how you decide to act, and so on, is all to do with how you interpret your perception as opposed to what's going on in the theater. And so this death of the ego is a kind of acceptance that you obstinately believed and held on to your delusions that originated in your acceptance of a culture based on sense perception. And now you recognize that this was inaccurate, you accept defeat, and then you attain immunity from unreliable public opinion and toxic conventional morality. So these two expressions, unreliable public opinion and toxic conventional morality, are the essence of the Ramayana. So the Ramayana is all the stuff that happens between people in any social gathering. And so then you also hear in Gyan that the people who fail are the people of the Silver Age, which is the people who operate according to the way reality is described in the Ramayana. And the people who succeed are the people who operate the way that things are described in the Mahabharata. And so this is why you have like Golden Age souls and Silver Age souls. So if you're operating according to unreliable public opinion and toxic conventional morality, that puts you in the Silver Age right there. And if you operate according to the Mahabharata, which means that you have to eventually stop arguing with God and accept defeat and kill the enemy which cannot be killed, but kill it anyway. And so that's more subtle, but that's the Golden Age souls. So this is quite deep. It takes a long, long time to grasp these ideas. Because it's all very based on allegory and perception, which is not sense perception, and logic, which is not based on sense perception. So you really have to get your intellect to be golden. Sometimes he talks about a pure gold intellect, which is very subtle, very, very subtle. And that takes time and yoga to acquire that. Okay, let's go to the next one. So Shiva is called the ocean of knowledge, and he gives us these droplets day by day as we navigate the ocean of life on earth and all its complexities and paradoxes, and all things lead to death and eternal life. That's the way it is. So we sit at his feet as his students for decades on a pilgrimage of the mind and heart, grappling with doubt, uncertainty, and brain fog, occasionally soaring into the ecstasy of fusion with the power, light, and bliss of God. And the intellect is astounded in the splendor of a moment of clarity and understanding. So this is the end of the write-up that I had prepared for this. So I'm going to turn it over to Sister Rose and we will go further. Om Shanti.
Explanation, but you may need to have 2 minutes, Sister Denise, to have a glass of water.
Yes.
Deep topics of Dharma, Maya, and of course, again, the importance of being able to differentiate bhakti, and spirituality, which takes time and experience. Uh, you mentioned that in the explanation of irreligiousness and unrighteousness, it results in a forceful description of how one is not allowed to do this or to do that, such as I think we are very aware and familiar with those. My question is, having said that, still there is a certain standard that we expect from people who claim to be spiritual to uphold, such as respect or integrity, or in other words, walking one stop. So, how, how do I reconcile that?
Well, I would say that it's all to do with conscience. You see, when souls are weak, that means to say when the energy of what Baba calls yoga power is low, then the soul automatically and necessarily goes against its essence. And so you can say the elements of the soul are purity, peace, power, love, and bliss. And so when you're in your power, you operate according to that. But when you are not in your power, then you operate the opposite of that. And so you have the conscience, which is also part of the intellect. And the intellect is the part of consciousness where knowledge goes. You see, knowledge goes into your intellect, which then processes the knowledge. And the purpose of the knowledge is to enable you to have yoga, which means to enable you to get power from God. And when you get power from God, then your soul automatically and necessarily operates according to what it is, as opposed to what it is not. And you see, the religions are not capable of dealing with that subject in any way, shape, or form, because they have no clue who is God, or what is God, or what is the soul, or any of that. Mm-hmm. All they know is that they have this concept of justice, which means somebody who's in a position of power has a right to punish somebody who is disobeying them, who's in a position of weakness. And that's how the world operates, you see, and which is a lot of the time unjust, because people in a position of power, as it is said, well known, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the problem with people who are weak is they crave power, but they're weak. And so the way they crave power, one of the ways they crave power is misogyny. And so if you see anyone who is in a situation where they want political power, religious power, financial power, whatever, and these people, if you look at their personal lives, they are pretty weak. And they try to get power by violating a large number of women, especially very young girls, because that purity gives the guy a feeling of power which lasts for a short time, which is why he needs such a large number of young girls. And so this whole issue of human trafficking is very big, because there's so many wealthy people who crave power, and this is one of the ways they get it. Or you can also get power by killing other people. And of course, you kill people, you feel a little bit powerful for a short time, but you've also done negative karma in both cases, violating young girls or killing people. And so it's extremely counterproductive. It's also very addictive. Like any addiction, you feel that you get a little bit of power by indulging in your addiction, but it makes you weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker, and eventually it destroys you. And so this is what is happening in the world that we live in at the moment, and it's very catastrophic. But it's not understood, what's going on, because the religions are part of it. And so this is why Baba is needed, because there's no other solution. And it has reached a maximum point of spiritual depletion. And so when people come into Raj Yoga, we will say, okay, this is designed to attract the people who have been on earth for the longest time. So that means they have been the most depleted, and they need a huge amount of spiritual power from God to get back to their original condition. So this word parivartan, which is always translated as transformation, doesn't mean that you have to become something that you're not. It means that you have to revert to your original condition. Now, because the problem is you lost power, the solution is you have to be re-empowered and purified. So this is what I started this write-up with, that Baba's purpose is to purify and re-empower the world, humanity. And then the people who become Raj Yogis, like serious Raj Yogis, they are deemed to be those who used to be the kings in the first part of the cycle. And so they have to be the ones who sustain the people by their spiritual power. And so this is what's going on here. And this is why you have to really understand Gyan properly, because if you don't, you can't do yoga properly. And if you don't, you can't get power. And if you don't get power, then you will do like the worldly people do in positions of political or religious power, is you will start to do corrupt activity, and you will start to cause serious harm to different people, and that's going against everything that God stands for. So this is something that you have to look at yourself about and see, well, what's going on here with me, because the individual is like a microcosm of the world. And so the whole world is impure and corrupt and spiritually depleted, and so am I. And so my purpose of being a Raj Yogi and doing this practice is to reverse that. And, in one way you can rotate the cycle moving forward, you can also rotate the cycle moving backwards. So you have to reverse yourself all the way back to the beginning, which is one way to do it, or you can go forward. Either way, you arrive at a state of empowerment.
Speaking of Maya, and as you rightly said, that it is inaccurate to use the pronoun she, because we don't have to personify Maya. Maya is an illusion. Maya means illusion, that which is not there. So, what are examples of Maya?
Well, this is a very, very subtle thing, you see, because if you use the word illusion, it's too gross. But if you use the word that which is not there, that's too difficult to conceptualize. So that makes it better to work with, actually, because people's ability to conceptualize is very limited. And part of Baba's work is to sharpen up our brains and minds and intellects, which are very rusty and not that great. So, you you have in your subconscious, you have sins, you see. Now, the psychological community doesn't look at it that way at all, but from Baba's angle, the subconscious is where your sins live. And your sins are bondage, karmic bondage. And so you have karmic bondages to people and places and objects. So when you perceive something in the material world, it will trigger one of your sins, which may have nothing to do with what you are perceiving, but there is some association. And this will cause what Baba talks about when he says sins. He says there's weight. Okay, so the weight will orient the soul away from the right position. You see, so for example, the best example I can give is when you have your car put in the garage to get your wheels balanced, they put weights on the wheels. Because if the wheel is not turning in the right orientation, it's not good for the car, and it wears the tires out in an unequal manner. So you put the weight to balance the wheels. Now, the soul corresponds to a wheel, and when there is sin on the soul, it's like a weight which deviates the soul away from the right track. And so a sense perception will trigger a weight, and your reaction to that sense perception will be to repeat the sin and increase the weight. And that is how Maya operates. Now, it is said Maya is not there, or it's because what you are perceiving is like a film. So you're perceiving this 3D or 5D film with sight, hearing, touch, fragrance, and taste, right? So this is all your sense organs are activated by what you perceive, and it sends signals to the brain, which is received in the mind, and the mind is absolutely affected by the subconscious. And this causes you to perform karma, but the intellect, its job of the intellect is to interrupt it if it sees anything that deviates it away from the right path, and that is called conscience. So when the soul is empowered, in the confluence age, this doesn't happen and doesn't need to happen in the golden age. In the confluence age, you take power from Baba by your regular meditation. And Maya as a force of evil, which is aside from your personal Mayas, but the overall force of evil will do whatever possible to interfere in your meditation. So sometimes Baba says Maya doesn't interfere in knowledge, it interferes in yoga. And people don't know how to interpret that statement, so they interpret it however they want. But to detect Maya, you have to be very subtle, because you have to notice when the actual vibration that is the essential you is being interfered with by another force, an external force which is in the atmosphere. And that external force is like an energy that is the opposite of God. Now, when people start remembering God, they provoke that energy. So if you are a really powerful yogi, you will provoke the energy of Maya or the force of evil really strongly, and it will come and attack you very strongly in many different ways. So if you're not strong, don't be a Raj Yogi, because you need to be very strong, because you're up against the force of evil. And your job is to destroy it. And it is as powerful as God. So you, little you, normal basic human, is positioned facing off with the force of evil, which is as powerful as the force of God. That's enough to terrify anyone. But then Baba says, no, that's not how you do it. I am equal to the force of evil, plus you is greater than the force of evil. So as long as you are in union or in communion with Baba, you have a force which is greater than the force of evil by a factor of 1. And then you are able to detect it, and you are able to neutralize it every time it manifests itself in little ways or big ways. And as time goes by, you become more and more experienced. But also, it becomes more and more dangerous, because it will attack you stronger and stronger. So basically, you have to keep up with it. And this is why in BK it is said that you should not leave Baba's hand, because if you leave Baba's hand, then you're not increasing your power. And then, but Maya is not going to leave you alone, so it will go and cause serious problems to you. I mean, initially you will get benefit of all the good karma that you've done in Gyan and in service and so on. But then when that runs out, then Maya comes at you really strongly, and that you don't have enough power to resist it. So this is the caveat that has been given to BKs. But you see, because people don't understand this particularly well, they just say things without knowing what it means or what it entails. Now, what used to happen in the old days is the daddies would explain all this in detail, so we knew exactly what was what. But I don't see anybody doing that anymore. Maybe it's they don't know, maybe they too scared about it, or maybe I don't know why, but they don't. So this is the thing. And you have to be very very aware what you're doing when you take up Raj Yoga. You have to be aware that you are now no longer operating like a general basic human, but you are linked to God, and you are enlisted in the spiritual military, and you have to fight this force of evil, which is invisible, intangible, and it gets you through your existing sins, which may be from, many, many lives ago. But you have sanskaras. And so your sins show up in your sanskaras. Your sanskaras are your buttons. We talk about pressing people's buttons. So these are your buttons. And so Maya will press your buttons, and then you operate according to what happens when that button is pressed. So it could be an emotional reaction, it could be an action that is contrary to Brahmin lifestyle, all sorts of things. And all of it is partly because you're powerful and partly because you're not powerful enough. And so that seems like a contradiction, but it's more like a paradox, because the more powerful you are, the stronger Maya will come to you. And when Maya is coming to you, you've got to be stronger than it. And if you're not stronger than it, you better get stronger. And so this is why one has to kind of really upgrade the yoga. And in order to upgrade the yoga, according to me, we need to upgrade the Gyan. And now what I'm interested in is that the way Baba is talking to us about the drama is we have to consider it as something like how we consider the soul and God and drama. But at the moment we've been thinking, okay, the soul is incorporeal, God is incorporeal, and drama is material. But it's better not to do that. And many people are saying, okay, the 5,000 year cycle is being shown to be incorrect by all of the scientific discoveries that are telling us about matter, which doesn't correspond with it. But what I'm thinking is that, Baba says to us, we are actors, and there is a drama, and we are playing in it, and we have a predestined part, and the part lives in the soul, not on the earth. So the earth is the theater, but the theater is not the drama. The drama takes place in the theater, or on the stage. So we need to distinguish between the theater and the drama. Now, what most BKs do is they think the theater and the drama is all one thing, but no, it's two things. So the drama is what occurs in our consciousness and what is recorded in our consciousness moment by moment, which is already pre-recorded, you see, which is nothing to do with the material 5 elements of matter. The 5 elements of matter are where all this takes place, you see, and our bodies are part of the theater. But the role we play is not part of our body. And people don't get that. They think, I'm an actor, this body is my costume, which means my costume is part of the drama. It's more like part of the theater. And so, to arrive at a level of soul consciousness that takes into consideration that the drama is non-material and the stage is material, make that distinction, that means that you can be a conqueror of Maya. Because the Maya will only get to you as long as you think that your body is part of the drama. And that other people's bodies are part of the drama. And so that idea of thinking that your body and other people's bodies are part of the drama is called body consciousness, because they are part of the stage. So when you see your body and other people's bodies are all part of the stage, then you can be detached from your body and everybody else's bodies. And that means that the buttons can't be pressed, which means that you can become karmatit. But matter is a very powerful magnet on the soul. And so the soul is in bondage to the body, in bondage to matter. And yoga is to make us free from this bondage. And we have a bondage to matter, which is a bondage of karma. And Baba says it's a blood bondage. Because your body is made of blood, or made with blood. So when in the traditional healing ceremonies, they usually want blood sacrifice. And in the temples, for example, there is an interesting video which is called Christspiracy, that I was introduced to by Tamsin, Sister Tamsin. And it's all about how the reason why Jesus was crucified is because he interfered with the blood sacrifices in the temple in Jerusalem. And so therefore you have to be vegetarian. And he was vegetarian, and his apostles were mostly vegetarian, not all, but mostly. And so this then promotes animal rights and things like this. But when you talk about traditional pre-Christian, pre-Abrahamic, sort of Hindu-style religious activities, that involves blood sacrifice. And blood sacrifice is connected with this concept that you got born to your mother and father through their blood, and you got born with them because you have karma with them, and that's why you got born with them. So your body, the existence of your presence in your body is because of a karmic bondage. And so in yoga, you have to become bodiless. You remember? Viceless, bodiless, and egoless. So bodiless means you have to become free from your karmic accounts with the community where you got born, because that's some kind of karmic bondage. And this is the reason why Baba said don't eat food that they give you and things like that, because then you can gradually disconnect from those people slowly, and by the power of yoga, become free from attachment to them. So this is all about a sin at that level, and which was worked with in what we call primitive religions through blood sacrifice. And that's just how things were in those days. But nowadays, people don't want to talk about that because they consider it evil, right? Especially if you're a Christian. And so then you just have bacon and eggs instead, or breakfast. But when we're looking at these analogies and symbols and so on, it's quite, I think, relevant to understand how this works and how our karmic bondages were interpreted in the primitive religions, which is where the Hinduism is based in, you see. And take, for example, the 5,000-year cycle is also there in the Mayan civilization. They all did blood sacrifice, you see. And so then people say, oh, they do blood sacrifice, therefore they don't know anything. But actually, no, they know something. But we don't understand those things, but we can understand them if we want to. So now that's your bondage to your lokics. Then you have bondage to people that you may have harmed. either in war or financially or some kind of exploitation. You remember the whole issue of exploitation is a big one. And when you use people or misuse people, then you come in karmic bondage with them. And so on one level, they will come and misuse you back, and then you get into a tit for tat that's endless. And this is why wars keep on repeating themselves and getting worse and worse as the karma gets more and more. And eventually, this karma between large groups of people, which is mentioned in the Mahabharata. So the Mahabharata is the war between brothers. So the Pandavas and Kauravas are brothers, and that's the whole community of India. But you extend it to the rest of the world. When Baba talks about nuclear war, he says it is between the Americans and the Russians. And of course, these are governments which both have roughly 6,000 nuclear bombs each, which is enough to destroy the world many times over. And now they're creating hypersonic bombs, which they prefer to nuclear bombs because it doesn't do radiation, but it turns the target to dust. So that's a good way to get rid of people without poisoning the land. So this is how these things are growing and growing and growing under the influence of Maya, which can also be called the force of evil, which is like a magnet, which is as powerful as a magnetic force of God. So you're stuck between like a hamburger in between two buns, which are like two magnets. And you have to choose to be attracted to the magnet of God and get demagnetized from the attraction to matter. So we have to conquer matter and Maya. So if you go for the Christian crucifixion of Jesus, they all say that he conquered matter and Maya. Now, this is not a historical thing. This is a symbolic thing, which didn't actually apply to Jesus, but which actually applies to yogis. And so we have to be those who become karmatit. This is our aim, to become karmatit, which means we have to conquer our bondage to matter, which is our bodies, and to Maya, which is the attraction and repulsion to objects, people, and places. And so this is our practice. And people do it at varying different levels. And what I'm saying here is that if we consider the drama to be inside us rather than outside us, it gives us leverage to be able to do this practice more effectively. But it's at a much higher level, a much more subtle level than what BKs ordinarily think. But I still think that it's valid, even though, not that many people will do this, but they can if they want. Yeah. I can't hear you.
Repeatedly. So when we, for example, say that, oh, that's drama, and referring to an event or a scene that is unfolding, it's actually like, because now it's actually my first time to hear this distinction between drama and stage, because I have always understood that drama unfolds on the stage. So that's why we often hear this phrase, "Oh, that's drama." But actually, it is an event on the stage.
It's an event on the stage which is perceived differently by different people who are looking at it from different positions on the stage. But the actual experience of it is on the inside.
Mhm.
Now, when you are body conscious, you're operating according to what is called in the Ramayana as toxic conventional morality, or what I have said, this is described in the Ramayana, toxic conventional morality and public opinion, you see. So that means if you are a BK and you are applying conventional morality mixed into Gyan, when you use the expression, "Oh, that's drama," you're doing some kind of insult. Because you're insulting the person who is being affected by it emotionally. You're being cruel and insensitive. They will feel it, and you will have created a karmic bondage, and you will suffer for it. And all of this is a kind of Ramayana interaction. And we need to move from this Silver Age approach to Gyan of the Ramayana to the Mahabharata, which is quite different and much more difficult. And so when something is going on, which you see, when you hear this word, "Oh, that's drama," this is a BK sort of convention that has grown up, a kind of, like I don't know what word to put on it. It's like an expression that's used.
It's like a jargon.
It's like a jargon, but it's also an expression to excuse you from having to deal with it realistically and properly. And it puts you as a insensitive, unpleasant type of human. And you are very arrogant when you do that, because you think that you know it all, but you're again this mouse who got a piece of turmeric and thought he was a grocer. You see, and this is one of the reasons why you have so many people complaining about the BKs so much, because of the behavior of the people who are in power, behaving in this manner and treating people in a unkind manner, or being abusive or exploitative or whatever the thing is. And all of this, we could say, well, this is body consciousness, but the people don't realize that it's body consciousness, and they are identifying with their position in the BK organization rather than their relationship with Gyan and Sheikh Baba. You see, because then you need to be in relationship with Sheikh Baba as Dharmaraj, you see. So Dharmaraj means that, are you operating according to Dharma or Adharma? So when BKs lightly use the expression, "Oh, that's drama," as a way of being insensitive and unkind to somebody who's affected by a situation, they are operating fully in an adharma manner, which means they are losing power, losing points, because we are being graded all the time, continuous assessment. and they are also in for some karmic consequences, big time. And so all of this is, they're not aware about it, which means that there will be some sort of rude awakening at some point. And that may be not very nice, but it's inevitable, you see. And so once we detect that this sort of thing is a possibility, and that we ourselves might fall into those traps very easily, because you can't be this level of soul conscious all the time. And especially when you are having sanskaras of being arrogant and insensitive and all of this, the circumstances push those buttons and you forget all your gyan and yoga and operate as if you didn't know anything in the first place. But you're doing a lot of damage, you see, and this can happen in a second. And so we need to observe ourselves very carefully so that we really understand what our trigger points are. And how is our level of yoga? You know, Baba keeps on telling us to keep a chart and so on, which nobody does, because it's difficult to assess your level of yoga without really being very attentive to yourself. And that's a lot of work and out of range of most people. And it's easy to get into a position of power and boss people around. That's really easy. But to actually become a powerful soul and deal with the force of evil while all of these dramas are going on and still be a person of dharma, that's high level. And this is what Baba's looking for. People at that level, these are king quality BKs, you see. And this is why we're doing Raj Yoga. And so any of us who say, okay, no, I want to do Raj Yoga at this level, I don't want to be that other kind of Raj Yogi, that's not my cup of tea, then you will really try and do this, and you will not be at all concerned about what's your position or whether somebody thinks you're wonderful, marvelous, and fantastic or not, whether they think you're a waste of time or not. It's nothing to do with anything, you see, because that's not, you're not part of that game. It's a game, but it's not the game. The game is on a much higher level. And once you detect that there are all these games going on and you can decide what game you want to play. You want to play for high stakes, and they say the Pandavas are gamblers. And they're not very good at it. But eventually, after 14 years of exile, Yudhisthira, who was the eldest brother of the Pandavas, he became very, very good at gambling. But he started off being absolutely useless, which means that, you know, it's our story. We think we're great, whatever, whatever. Eventually, circumstances show, hey, you're not that great. Wake up. And you have to, you know, exile, you have to have defeat. And then only you can achieve a real serious victory. And so it is said in BK that if you want to be a king, you have to have passed through massive, massive insults. You have to be really badly insulted by everybody and handle it. You see, a lot of people, they don't want to be insulted by everybody or rejected or, you know, slandered or all of these things that they say, no, I didn't sign up for this, but you did. You just didn't read the fine print. But if you realize that, yeah, no, we did sign up for this, okay, and we're not going to be in kindergarten forever. Eventually, you're going to go to a higher class, and in a higher class, the exams are much more difficult. You see, and in the Murli today, which I wanted to really take up during our session, but we don't have time for it. But he was talking about how high the exams are. And so if you're going to go for a high level of Raj Yoga, then you have signed up for taking very stiff exams. And so you have to be realistic with yourself about what you're doing here. And then I think you can move forward really, really very nicely. Yeah.
Thank you so much, St. Denise. I think on this note, we can finish the second session